So The Void, which is this sort of crowd-funded, low-budget horror film directed by Jeremy Gillespie and Stephen Kostansky, who were previously art directors and makeup effects artists, respectively, and also they've directed before on things like Manborg and Father's Day. So grisly opening, and then a police officer finds somebody stumbling, crawling out of the woods. He takes them to a hospital where there is just a skeleton crew in the middle of nowhere, where really weird monster stuff starts to happen. People turning into beasties, visions of other worlds, and the dead coming back to life. Here's a clip.
Hello, Daniel.
Who is this?
You saw something. I felt it when you woke up. But what was it? I can show you more if you like.
Hi, Richard.
I'm sure it's hard for you to understand. Beverly found it difficult as well. But I assure you, my intentions are altruistic.
Please. Tell me what you've done. Richard. Richard, tell me. Tell me!
You're trying so hard to follow in your father's footsteps, Daniel.
This was first flagged up for me because when they were doing the funding, they had mentioned Exorcist 3 as a hospital-bound horror, and I love Exorcist 3, particularly if you're a fan of it. You'll know that recently in America they've done a Scream Factory reconstruction of Bill Blatty's original cut of that film, which I would advise anybody to seek out. It's really good. And so I thought, oh, okay, fine. So that piqued my interest. And they had talked about being inspired by films like Alien and Prince of Darkness and this is all stuff that I like. There's also, funnily enough, when you see the film, there's more than a touch of sort of like a kind of slightly low-rent version of Nick Reffen's Neon Demon with the occult triangle symbols. I think that is actually completely accidental and coincidental. In terms of the way the film is put together, the plot is fairly ropey. The script is somewhat pedestrian, and the sort of the way in which it dramatically unfolds is, let's say, uneven. I mean, actually, the directors have worked before much more in the area of comedy. This is something that they're doing which is much straighter. However, the film does have a reliance on physical effects, which I always find sort of affecting and charming. So rather than, relying on CGI and that sort of stuff, we're talking about, polymethylcellulose and...
talking about what?
Sort of latex and, animatronic, stuff that is really physically there, actual bug monsters. And so I ended up, whilst I was watching it, being reminded to some extent of Brian Yuzna and the shunting stuff from Society, in which... Well, Society is a really sort of really brilliant 1980s, what's the best way of describing it? Plastic reality movies, late 80s, early 90s, plastic reality. So Brian Yuzna always used to talk about, he said, it's not horror, it's more than that, it's plastic reality. And he was always very influenced by Lovecraft, the weirdness of Lovecraft, the idea
I don't know what
that
a plastic reality movie is.
So the way that Brian Yuzna described it was, that bit in Nightmare on Elm Street when Heather Langenkamp has the phone and Freddy's tongue comes out of the phone.
Okay.
He says, that's not gore, that's plastic reality. Okay, fine.
I got it.
So in the case of this, I mean, there is a lot of sort of scrunge and gore, but there is also, and there are, nods towards Clive Barker's Hellraiser, particularly in one of the characters who starts to look, weirdly like Frank. And there's a lot of John Carpenter in there too. I mean, obviously, The Thing is in there along with Prince of Darkness. And I think that as a narrative exercise, it fumbles and isn't brilliant. But as a piece of sort of throwback physical monster movie entertainment, there is a part of me that is so attached to that sort of that I do admire the fact of how physical it was, even when it becomes fairly silly. I like the idea of people actually working with proper prosthetics, proper rubber monsters that are having, that are
Plastic reality.
Plastic reality.
That's
Thank you very much. And as I said before, I mean, it's interesting because Yuzna does look like an influence, and Yuzna obviously is so influenced by Lovecraft, and Lovecraft is kind of hanging in the back of this. So it's probably something that will primarily find its audience at home on DVD. But if you're somebody, if you're a Fangoria reader, in the 80s and 90s, this'll absolutely you'll get it.
Tickle your fancy.
Tickle your fancy.